Hi. Today I want to talk about the normal and decked out selectors for Hero Covenant summon ticket banner things that I'm sure you guys are familiar with. We've been given one at the end of every single week if I'm not mistaken, or that in between that and an artifact selector, which is totally fine, but I haven't made a video on it, so I wanted to give some of my thoughts, my suggestions, and without further ado, let's get into it. So first and foremost, as you can see, we have my normal selector tier list. Now, let me be clear. I've kind of strayed away from the S, A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever tier list kind of format because, truth be told, there is a lot of context that you need to know, specifically with these selectors, and the use case for them is kind of nuanced. So let me begin by saying that the normal selector, in my opinion, is best used for characters that are basically missing from your codex or from your roster and you don't have any copies of them. If you just want to collect them for collection purposes, that makes the most sense in my opinion, and that's fantastic, or a fantastic reason for using selectors. Additionally, if you are someone that is already maxed out of all, you have every character in the game and all you're looking for is to propel yourself further into the end game, I think normal selectors are honestly fine for using them on imprints. Now, that isn't going to be the purpose of the normal selector tier list that I have here, and obviously the reason why I made this tier list is primarily for players that are unsure about what to use with their selector, so let me explain my reasoning and thinking first. Now, based off of what I just mentioned earlier, the most important characters that you see here are Iseria, Destina, and Rowana. And based off of what I just mentioned, it's true. Iseria, with one copy, basically does her job to the level that you'd expect an Iseria to do her job. Same thing with Destina, same thing with Rowana. Now, we'll go a little bit more in depth with this and why I think that some of the characters in the normal selector tier list will overlap into the decked out selector tier list, but for all intents and purposes, these characters, even just getting one copy of them, is so important that they probably take priority in being on your account in whatever capacity you can find them. Now, in terms of the ideal to own section of the normal selector tier list, we have Ravi, Selene, and Politis. Now, Iseria, Destina, and Rowana are great for a bunch of different content, including some Guild Wars, some PvE, and honestly, even some Arena or, RTA, depending on where you're using them. And the most important, no pun intended, or not intentionally trying to use the name, the most important reason why you'd even use Iseria, Destina, and Rowana is because they're fundamentally characters that will be used in several different pieces of content, regardless where you are in epicseven. It doesn't matter if you're an early game player, a mid game player, or a late game player. At some point down the road, you're going to have to use these characters, at least as of what we know right now. Now, the ideal to own characters of Ravi, Selene, and Politis may not provide the same level of healing or utility that characters like Iseria, Destina, and Rowana have, but they have their own charm and very effective usage. A character like Ravi, for instance, has great places or has a great role in not only being a drain kind of lifesteal bruiser that does damage and also prevents herself from dying very easily in both PvE and PvP, but she's also a fairly easy character to build if you don't care about the excess stat waste. For all intents and purposes, assuming that you're just able to get HP and attack even, she basically gets free crit and she does a lot of damage and isn't really that easy to kill just in general. And if you're trying to pick someone like Ravi against the current state of anti-crit characters that exist in the game right now, not a bad option even from a PvP standpoint. Now, she is, of course, also usable in certain expeditions, if I'm not mistaken, golem hunts, certain abyss stages as well, though not the best in slot, as most of you guys already know. It does make her quite ideal to pick or to own on your account. Now, for Selene and Politis, these two characters are also really, really impactful because they basically deal with all of the nonsensical, annoying cleave or punishing speed units that exist in the game currently. Now, I will be absolutely blunt and clear with you guys right now. Harsetti has one of the most ridiculous win rates that I've seen across any released ML5 in recent history and recent memory, with her, I believe, having the second highest win rate in the game at 64% with like a decent win rate, or pick rate rather. And so, truth be told, I don't really know how good Selene and Politis are going to be here. It's very possible that these characters are unnecessary since Harsetti maybe just makes every player play slow. But as some of you guys mentioned, and I guess I should have reinforced it, yes, it is very much possible for players to just ban a character like Harsetti. But as I'm sure you guys will eventually understand, just banning a character for RTA is not the one-size-fit-all band-aid for a problem or a threat like Harsetti, because if that was the case, well, guys, I'd love to ban Ilanov, Zeo, Billion, Candy, Eufine, the list goes on. And for what it's worth as well, you're not able to ban out or remove a character like Harsetti from an arena or guild war defense. So tier list and conversation around these characters is very important, not just in the context of RTA, but all content. Now, back to this, when we're talking about Selene and Politis, if we aren't considering a character like Harsetti, yes, there's actually very good value in characters like Selene and Politis. And actually, if you're using someone like Harsetti alongside Selene and Politis, I think they have decent value too. But the main reason why they're up here is because they also sometimes have great value, whether it's in certain niche or in certain scenarios for PvP, but also in sometimes usable expedition fights. Now, to be clear, this is definitely not your ideal best in slot, and as I originally mentioned, Ravi may not have the perfect, must-have situation in every single PvE, encounter, but she is usable in a lot of these fights where maybe you need someone that doesn't need to die, or maybe you need to prevent someone from, basically getting run over, and you need someone that counters. Well, a character like Ravi is your answer. Now, if you have non-attack skill characters, Selene and Politis are, of course, going to do very well, but these are in the ideal to own category and are primarily for the expectation that you're fighting against slower players, or if you're fighting against newer players that have maybe some punishing characters like that Ray, or maybe someone like Flan. You're afraid of a character like this from maybe being put onto a team. Now, the category below this is luxury. Now, you might have noticed there's only 4 characters here, and the reason why I put these characters in luxury is because, guys, before anything else, we're in the midst of one of the biggest shakeups in epicseven's meta that I've ever seen. We're unsure about whether speed is going to be relevant. There are literally dozens of players at this point that I'm encountering every day that are re-equipping their entire team compositions or building 2 of every single character for the purposes of picking a slow Harsetti-tuned variation and a normal variation of a team, specifically because of how impactful Harsetti is. Now, with that being the case, some characters, like the ones I'm about to list right now, might have literally no value. Like, what is a character like Knockwall going to do if she gets outsped and slept by a Death Dealer Ray? Literally nothing. She's just fodder. Now, the same can be said for a character like Ran, and that's primarily why I put them in the luxury category, because yes, okay, if Harsetti's pre-banned, yeah, a character like Ran and Knockwall are still probably going to have value. But the other 2 characters in this list are characters that I think are a little bit more difficult to not justify putting on this list, and rather, I see their potential as something worth considering, especially if you are a newer or a more casual player. Now, if you are someone that does Nightmare Raid or Hell Raid, you're probably familiar with Lilius, or you've seen Lilius being recommended in some cases. And honestly, yeah, she's pretty decent for PvE, but she's also got some uses sometimes in PvP as well. Now, again, the meta is shaking up. It's really difficult to say that a character like Lilius is going to even find a place in the next 2 or 3 weeks of play. However, given that she is quite often sometimes seen in guild war defenses, and sometimes also used as an answer for certain compositions in arena as well, okay, sure, you can definitely justify picking a character like Lilius, but she also has the double value in being an imprint for Conqueror Lilius or Midnight Gala Lilius, 2 characters that honestly I consider to be still pretty good. Now, the final character that we have in this list is Mort. And if you are going to throw away the viability of a character like Lilius, Ran, and Knockwall because you think the meta is about to get shooken up, well, guess what? Mort is your other option in the luxury category because, well, he looks ridiculous, guys. I can't imagine a world where Mort is not one of the top picks or one of the most commonly seen, or at least initially tested characters once the balance patch comes out. And it's simply put because Smilegate has had enough. They literally just invented a character that said, you can't counter while I'm on field. It doesn't matter if I use anything. It's just, don't do this. You can't do this. You can't counter. That's it. Plain and simple. And he's got a bunch of very interesting aspects or kits in his, or has a bunch of different interesting, I guess, what would I call it? Features in his kit that I think lead him to be very interesting. Now, not only is his PvP capability very high, I also think that with his ignore effect resistance, he's probably also going to be a decent answer or a decent option in PvE as well. Now, if you don't want someone that counterattacks, or rather, if you want someone that can defense break, you have someone that also heals themselves, deals a decent amount of damage, and it's probably going to give you double value both in PvP and PvE. I actually think that Mort is not in the ideal to own category necessarily because he's untested, and I think calling a character like that ideal already to own when there isn't much proven experience with the character, we don't know what's going to come out soon after. I think the highest I can put him at is luxury rather. And you might be wondering, well, Connor, what about all these other characters? You may be thinking about, oh, what about I don't know, Zahak, Famir, Bellona, whatever. All these characters, guys, I'm going to be honest with you, are not on the same caliber in terms of any of these others. Now, of course, a character like Bellona maybe can be used in something like Rift, but if you're someone that's looking at a selector tier list like this, you're probably already pissed off that there's no Wukong in the list, and therefore, if you want to use it on Bellona, that's totally fine, but just being usable specifically in something like Rift, I think is a little bit different than some of the other characters here, and if you really want to, you can put her in the luxury category because I do know that she drastically changes how easy it is to do Rift, which I consider to be one of the best pieces of PvE content right now. Now, this is the normal selector tier list. There aren't that many options here because outside of these, well, basic 10 picks that you have here, everything else is subjective. I'm not really keen on trying to discuss whether someone like Abigail is as good as, Peyra for a newer account because, guys, if you're on an early account, by the time you're able to build those characters, this tier list will already change. But that does bring us to the conversation of the decked out selector tier list. And this tier list you guys might be surprised by. Now, notably, the first character you might have noticed is missing here, rather, is Iseria. And the reason why she's missing here is because, honestly, I cannot imagine a world where you don't use the normal selector specifically on Iseria. Now, if you're also curious why I didn't include her specifically on the decked out selector, if you guys aren't familiar with what the term decked out means, it refers to the fact that they are fully upgraded at the cost of literally nothing. That's just how it is. Now, to bring this back for a moment, let me show you exactly what Iseria gains if you decide to fully deck her out. Well, number one, you gain damage on her S3, which is okay, not very helpful, but you do get the turn cooldown. You gain, well, a couple extra molas and catalysts here for +3 on her S2, and you gain, well, a bunch of damage on her S1. You can kind of tell why, specifically for the decked out selector, this feels like it would maybe be a bit of a waste. Now, I will say, beyond anything else, while I do think that using a decked out selector on Iseria specifically is a waste, relative because you don't really need anything beyond +4, this maxed out, and her skill cooldown on S3, I will say, no matter what, bottom line, if you're unable to get Iseria by some random, for whatever reason, and the only way that you can get Iseria is through the decked out selector, I would recommend you and definitely encourage you to get her. However, for 99.99% of players, you can just either summon her through the side story or you can just get her through a selector if you're impatient. Now, this isn't even talking about whether or not you decide to just use her ultimately or pick her specifically from, I don't know, like the beginning summoning selective, but okay, whatever. If we're gonna take that out for a moment, let's get back to the decked out selector tier list. Now, there are, again, characters here that are most important, amazing when maxed, and luxury. Now, let's begin again with Destina and Ruana, and you might be, again, a little bit confused because, well, what's going on here? Iseria, Destina, and Ruana were all here, but rather than have Destina and Ruana alongside Iseria again, all I have is Destina and Ruana. Oh, sorry, I apologize for that. Now, the reason why they're here specifically is because, unlike a character like Iseria, there is an insane amount of value to Destina and Ruana in not just PvE, and not just for their healing in PvE, but also for their healing and usability in PvP. Destina is definitely making a resurgence right now in arena defense specifically, and she has almost never lost her place in arena offense if you're ever looking for someone to pair alongside your Dark Corvus. Yes, we know that you guys still exist. Don't worry. Dark Corvus players, I will not make fun of you. I'm a bit of a Dark Corvus lover myself. However, the main reason why Destina and Rowana still remain here as opposed to Iseria is because a lot of their effectiveness and usability, not just specifically in PvE, but in PvP, is or derives from being able to heal her allies up to full. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever tested a Rowana or a Destina that doesn't have molas in them, but they feel terrible. Spoiler. Now, to mitigate this, if you have the ability to use one of your decked out selectors on these two characters, I think that is totally fine and actually going to make your life a lot easier. Now, this isn't a game-breaking, oh my god, if you don't use a selector or the decked out selector specifically on Rowana and Destina, they'll never be playable type of situation, but it is inarguable, in my opinion, that the best value from the decked out selector is going to be going towards characters that you would otherwise want to fully max out, but you don't have the catalyst, you don't have the desire, or you don't have the molas to upgrade, but they would be very impactful. And that's the definition of Destina and Rowana's kits. Increased healing whenever you get countered or extra attacks happen, increased healing on the S3s of both of these characters, decreased cooldowns, healings on S1 from Destina. All these things contribute to honestly really valuable advantages in combat and PvP and PvE, whatever it is, and that's why they top the tier specifically for my decked out selector tier list. Now the next section is amazing when maxed. Now again, I'm not really someone that's willing to put, oh, this is like between A and C, this is like a B. These are just great characters if you want to have them at maxed, and they don't necessarily have to be picked. But speaking candidly from my experience with these characters either don't really work that well without being maxed, or they are so valuable when they're maxed that it feels like a no-brainer, and it's just probably worth it for you to use something like your selectors or your selector tickets on your Pokédex or your journal completion, as opposed to using a decked out selector on something like that instead. Now, that includes, again, some familiar faces, Ravi, Celine, but a couple of new faces to the category, which instead of Politis and stuff like that, who I actually don't think are that impactful right now for the decked out selector tier list. Again, because I'm unsure how important a character like Politis is going to be in the state of, well, every character punishing you for debuffing. I do think that characters like Mort, Arya, and Elena will still have very solid value, especially if you have them maxed out. Now, let me explain. If you want to talk about Celine for a moment, Celine is by far one of the nicest, most easy turn your brain off answers to arguably one of the strongest PvP characters in the game right now, Death Dealer Ray. There aren't that many answers to Death Dealer Ray, honestly, and as someone that is literally in the middle of dying doing Emperor Arena and Legend Arena, being top like whatever 20, 30, 40, whatever, Celine honestly doesn't even like deal with Death Dealer Ray that well, but he's one of the only answers, or she's rather one of the only answers that I have for a character like that, and I've been experimenting with her. However, in Arena, it's not so effective, but in Guild War, well, guess what? If they have a Death Dealer Ray for some reason, or if they have some random non-attack skill, your Celine better be maxed out and doing damage, otherwise this character is, well, to say, for lack of better words, useless. Now, again, this doesn't necessarily mean that for the decked out selector tier list, she is miles and leaps and bounds above characters like Ravi, Mort, Elena, or Arya in terms of how good she is. But simply put, in terms of value from maxing them, well, guess what? If you don't have a Celine, this character is almost not even usable. Now, a similar sort of sentiment can be said actually about the other characters here, including Elena, Arya, and Mort. Now, Ravi, I would definitely still argue can be used at whatever kind of investment that you have her, which is also why I still kept her in the ideal to own at least one selector kind of list. But truth be told, all 5 characters here can definitely value or gain value from being maxed. They're either damage dealers or they have something specific in their kit that wants to be maxed in order for them to be effective. Excuse me. And a character that you might think, I guess, kind of separates themselves from the pack is Elena. Now, Mort we've already seen. If you haven't already seen, rather, go ahead and check out my balance patch notes right now. Mort is, of course, a character that does all of his fearing. He does all the healing. He has the you can't counter me team composition or the team value. And then a character like Arya is another damage dealer who wants insane or, insane investment so that she can do a bunch of damage. But what's with Elena? Why is Elena here? Well, just to give you a bit of a preview, for those of you that haven't experienced what it's like to fight against literally the current state of Arena or Guild War right now, there are tons of players that are using characters like New Moon Luna. They're trying to AoE with Ran. They're trying to do a bunch of random, really annoying things to try and cleave you. And I know, speaking as a cleaver and complaining about getting cleaved is super hypocritical. I apologize. But, I apologize again. But Elena, with her change to her EE, which now changes so that she can cleanse on the S2, actually makes Elena one of the best answers against Ran. Formerly, Ran could, in some cases, still deal with a character like Elena, because if you paired Ran with Politis, you would still keep the defense break. But with the way that Elena's new kit in S2 works, if you have the EE that changes it so that she cleanses on S2, if you pair Elena on Doctor's Bag, this Ran has literally no value whatsoever. Now, this isn't even talking about her value against, of course, characters like Knockwall, but guess what, guys? You know who else is really, really annoying right now when it comes to dealing AoE debuffs? Can anyone take a guess? That's right, it's not Harsetti, actually, because there are players that have 400 effectiveness on the character and beat the crap out of me. And that's not even talking about people that pair Elena alongside or Harsetti alongside Broman in Arena. I'll get to that in a different part. However, my point is that in most cases, having an AoE character like, again, Ran or Knockwall be countered by Elena is super, super valuable. And formerly, she wasn't that good at doing it, specifically because if you had 2 debuffs, you instantly kind of overloaded Elena's kit, and she ended up getting defense broken and died to most characters like Ludwig anyways. But because she not only gives mitigation on S2, but also has decent, if I'm not mistaken, value from her S1 with... Oh, actually not from her S1. Apologies, I was trying to reference which one it was. But because for Elena specifically, you want to gain the cooldown, and you also want all of this damage received value here, or damage decreased, damage dealt decreased value, rather. I do think that Elena is actually a decent candidate specifically for this section. Now, of course, if you want to remove her or move her down to luxury, I think that's totally fine. But I do find that the damage reduction is also quite important, especially if you're trying to pick Elena outside of just Ran, and if you're trying to pick her into characters or players that are just picking a bunch of AoE. However, I just think that that was my hot take and a bit of a creative suggestion, especially because the balance patch is coming up. Now, these other characters, in my opinion, are pretty self-explanatory. Again, Ravi, you want her to do a bunch of damage, and if you aren't using her on your normal selector and just committing the molas to her, well, guess what? She does definitely want all of the molas on her S1, S2, and S3. And guess what? Like I mentioned earlier, this is the case for all these other characters here. Mort, Celine, and Arya all share the same situation. And because they're PvP units, they deserve the plus 15. Moving along, we have Luxury. And again, these are some familiar faces here. You see Ran, Knockwall, and Lilius. And now, to be clear, guys, this is almost the identical kind of situation that we were just in when it comes to the normal selector. And that's, yeah, I think that Ran, Knockwall, and Lilius before Harsetti, and with a little bit of leniency and a little bit of consideration or a little bit of creativity, could definitely be a great choice specifically for the decked out selector. However, I cannot imagine that you're not going to see Harsetti in virtually every single arena defense. And to further prove that, just in case you're curious, I don't consider myself to be like the top of top. And it says I'm Arena 5 and probably Emperor. Yeah, literally Emperor. Let's just take a look at what the arena defenses look like right now. That's interesting. 3 Harsettis. And I'll even do you one better. I'll give up my win streak. Not very impressive anyways, because I'm 2. But let's see. Wow, that's interesting. 3 more Harsettis. I wonder if Ran and Knockwall are going to be used when Harsetti speed RNGs and affect your whole team. But you know what, Connor? Lucky reroll, right? One Harsetti, and look at that, guys. 2 teams that don't have Harsetti. I'm going to go buy a lottery ticket after this because if I reroll it again. Wow, 2 more Harsettis. Okay, you understand my point, and I probably honestly should have stopped it after the first. But the point is that, look, Harsetti is a very scary and usable character here, and I don't really know for sure to what extent characters that are speedy at all will be able to impact or be usable anymore. But since the point of a luxury unit is honestly more of a comfort pick or a kind of a pick that you decide on after, you know, you've gotten everyone above, or if you really just want to pick them and you don't care about what I say in this video, by all means, you can definitely pick any of the characters from the luxury section here specifically if you want to use them for your decked out selector, and I think it's okay. But just keep in mind, guys, that until they do something with Harsetti, Harsetti is looking quite insane, specifically for defenses. Now, I will say this final point because I've definitely seen a lot of commentary and pushback on Harsetti, specifically when it comes to her usability as a slow character against other slow players. Yes, believe it or not, Harsetti sucks against slow players because similar to how if you pick Elena into a team like that is completely slow and has no AoEs, obviously Elena is going to stink poo-poo caca. However, the point of Harsetti is to deal with fast players, cleave players, and if you know someone's going to play fast, or if you're about to encounter someone that's playing fast, yes, Harsetti is game breaking. She has the second highest play rate and win rate, while having a decently high play rate as well in the game, assuming she's not being pre-banned. So with that being the case, it feels a little bit disingenuous for me to say yes, and no matter what, guys, Ran, Knockwall, and Lilius are definitely your uncounterable best picks here, when in reality, the only ones that I'd really be comfortable suggesting to you at the moment are these top 7 characters, with some of these characters honestly being a bit dependent on the balance patch. Same could be said for the normal selector, where these top 6 are really the only ones that I think having at least 1 copy of will be valuable, and if nothing else, a lot of the characters in the top 6 can be used as imprints anyways. However, with all that being said, guys, I do want to give you a final kind of set of notes. Some of the comments recently have been a little abrasive, to be honest, and I apologize because, well, I get it. These are kind of longer videos, but I've been trying to give a bit more context and some nuance to the thinking behind my videos. And although I definitely have been wrong at times, I would hope that you guys believe me when I say that I am more than happy to say that I'm wrong. And to correct myself as I make through, or as I've made a couple of updated videos or reviews of characters in the past. But my hands are up. If this ends up being wrong in the future because, well, by some magic act of God, all the updated buffed characters are all really terrible, then sucks to suck, I guess. I apologize, but I think for the majority of players, these assessments that I've made and these predictions that I've made, especially when it comes to characters like Elena and Mort, I think are pretty spot on and pretty solid. And I don't think, again, I don't think me being cautious about characters like Rand, Knockwall, and Lilius are even that ridiculous or even that preposterous, especially with how unsettling or uncomfortable it feels to play RTA and Arena in Guild War right now. However, anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit more context, a bit more of an inside look into kind of how these characters feel to me specifically. If you want to talk more about it, feel free to do so in the comment section. Leave a like and subscribe as well if you enjoyed today's content, or if you learned something. And as always, guys, thanks again for watching. It's really late at night, and you guys already knew that, but I don't know why I keep mentioning it. Anyways, thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Please don't be that mean in the comment section. Good night.